G'day and welcome to the Unpopular View. This week, it's a literal view. That one. I'm at the Sugarloaf Reservoir, which is one of 9 that supplies Melbourne with its drinking water, and on average, they're 30.4% full and falling as I speak. I remember in the 80s and 90s, we used to do reckless things with water, crazy things like watering gardens, keeping lawns, washing cars, and on hot days we used to play in sprinklers and inflatable pools. They were good days, but they're gone. Forever, if this government gets its way. Now in the enlightened 21st century, we turn a blind eye to dead lawns and dying gardens. We drive dirty cars, we wash our clothes less often, and we time our showers to 4 minutes or less. How long before the garden state becomes the smelly state? The Victorian Government constantly reminds us that we're all living at 3A. Water restrictions that have become a normal part of life in what used to be the world's most livable city. Personal water usage has fallen from 250 litres per person per day till now we're set a target of 155. Incredibly, this isn't seen as a bad thing. In fact, we feel like we're doing our bit, saving the world one shower at a time. Well, I'm here to tell you, the target 155 is not the end of the story. In its 2006 Water Smart report, the government predicts Melbourne's population will grow 31% by the year 2055, which means we'll be on target 100 or below just a few decades from now. That's if we actually make it to 2055. Some groups predict that without new sources of water, we won't make it to 2015. But it's not all bad news. It may surprise you to learn that some parts of our state have far too much water. If I'd been standing here late last year, my head would have been underwater as the Mitchell River flooded yet again. In fact, according to the Australian Natural Resources Atlas, this river carries enough water to supply Melbourne and Sydney on its own. See, the Mitchell River lives a life of boom and bust. Most of the time it's as you see it now, placid, gentle, the perfect place for a family picnic. But a couple of times every decade it floods, destroying roads, killing crops and sending locals scurrying for safety. In fact, the East Gippsland Catchment Management Authority said in its July 25 newsletter of 2007 that catchments like the Mitchell have received major floods regularly ever since records have been kept. Take July 2007 for instance. In that 1 month, enough water swept past me here to supply Melbourne for the entire year. In 1 month. So did we catch that water? Maybe store it in dams so we could use it for crops in the dry years? Send some of it to Melbourne to take the pressure off our other dams and catchments? No. We let it all go out to sea, and in the process, we let it sweep away roads, crops, farmers' livelihoods. So, there's not enough water in Melbourne, and there's regular floods here in Gippsland. I wonder if there's something we could do that would solve both problems at once. Maybe something we could build. I think I'm having an idea. What if we... No, I forgot. But I can tell you what the government is doing to solve Melbourne's lack of water crisis. Yes, our government of action came down to the waterlogged southeast of Victoria and announced its solution. A desalination plant. Because there's obviously not enough water here to begin with. But let's take a closer look at this desalination plant. Estimates are that it will cost $3.1 billion to build and it will provide 1/3 of Melbourne's water. But it's also estimated that it will be responsible for doubling household water bills within 5 years and will produce as much greenhouse gas as 240,000 cars. And this desalination plant looks even worse when you compare it to the alternatives. Alternatives like, I don't know, building a dam on the Mitchell River? The estimated cost of the Mitchell River Dam is $1.35 billion, which is less than half the desal plant. And it will provide twice the water, and that's without jeopardising the health of the river, and in fact, protecting lives, properties and crops from the Mitchell River's regular floods. This government said in its 2006 Water Smart report that introducing energy-intensive sources of water would increase greenhouse gas emissions. No kidding. But desalination is about as energy-intensive as you can get. And they're building one. In that same 2006 report, the government said that new sources of water would not be required until the year 2030. And we paid for that report? I have a question. Who looked at these options, the desalination plant and the Mitchell River Dam, and said, more expensive, less expensive, produces less water, produces more water, increases the cost of water, doesn't increase the cost of water, spews out waste and carbon, produces zero emissions electricity, won't protect Bairnsdale from floods, will protect Bairnsdale from floods. Let's build that one. Who did that? Because seriously, whoever you are, please stop having children. But truth be told, This government never really considered building a Mitchell Dam. In fact, in 2002, they introduced legislation which turned the Mitchell Dam reservation, set aside decades ago by a government with much better foresight than this one, into a national park. Melbourne Water says on its website, "The building of new dams is not considered a desirable option for Melbourne due to the financial costs involved, environmental considerations, and the difficulty in finding new catchments." Excuse me? They can find $3.1 billion to build this monstrosity, but they can't find half that much to build a dam instead. And I think I found the catchment they were having difficulty sourcing. And how can using enormous amounts of electricity, producing greenhouse gases and concentrated saline, be better for the environment than stopping a river from flooding, washing topsoil and fertiliser and dead cows into the Gippsland lakes? And speaking of the environment, the Victorian Government has been releasing water as environmental flows to maintain the health of our rivers, because we've obviously just got so much to spare. But that leads me to a question. If the Victorian Government wants to maintain the health of our rivers, shouldn't they be trying to spread the burden of our water needs across as many sources as possible? The reason these rivers are becoming unhealthy is because we're taking too much of their water. But if they were to build a dam on the Mitchell River, we'd need less water from each river, and the overall Victorian river environment would actually become healthier. I could go on, but I think you get the idea. Every which way you look at it, building a dam on the Mitchell River just makes sense. It's better for the environment, costs less of our taxes, and provides more water for farmers and consumers alike. Sadly, this thing is being built, but even once it's finished, we'll still be on water restrictions, and our population is still growing. So I have some advice for the Victorian opposition. Grow some balls, start opposing this government, and make the Mitchell River Dam an election issue. If you promise to build it, the voters will come. My name's Topher, and that is my unpopular view.